The mockery begins. The air was thick with tension as Lyrex, a tall alien with sharp, glowing eyes, paced back and forth in the center of the room. His scales shimmered under the flickering lights, his tail swishing irritably behind him. His crew of alien onlookers was seated in a semicircle around him, their eyes fixed on a human who stood at the center of the room, trying not to look nervous. The human, Michael, had been brought here to entertain the aliens, nothing more. They had heard about the strange creatures called humans and their primitive music, and they were curious but mostly skeptical. They had seen countless species before, each one with its own way of making noise, but they all lacked something. The aliens believed they were the superior race, and no music from any species, least of all a human, could challenge that. Michael was no stranger to being underestimated. He had lived his life surrounded by skepticism and mockery, always the subject of ridicule. But he was here now, in the grand hall of the aliens, with the eyes of the galaxy's most advanced species watching him. The room was large and intimidating, with metallic walls and a cold, sterile atmosphere. Felt like a cage, but he wasn't afraid. He had learned to shut out the doubts and focus. He took a deep breath, his fingers nervously tracing the edge of the Xenotone, an alien instrument that was said to be impossible for humans to play. It was made of shimmering metal, with strange, twisting designs that looked nothing like anything he'd ever seen before. The aliens had mocked him when they first handed it to him. "What can a human like you possibly do with this?" Lyrex had asked, his voice dripping with amusement. Now Michael had to prove them wrong. He wasn't here to play for their amusement. He wasn't here to fail. He was here to show them the one thing that every alien had underestimated about humans: the power of emotion. "All right, human," Lyrex sneered, crossing his arms. "Let's see what you can do. Show us your music." The other aliens chuckled, exchanging smirks as Michael stood there, silently holding the Xenotone. They thought they were being kind by giving him a chance to perform. But in reality, they didn't expect anything impressive. They thought humans were nothing more than a joke, a species to be pitied, and their music? Well, it was seen as nothing but noise. Michael, however, was determined. He had studied the Xenotone the best he could. The moment he touched the instrument, it seemed to come alive, humming softly in his hands. His heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to let the pressure show. He had been through worse in his life. This was just another test. He took a deep breath, his fingers gently brushing the smooth surface of the Xenotone, trying to find a rhythm. The aliens continued to laugh quietly among themselves, their sharp eyes glinting with mockery. Michael ignored them. He wasn't here for their approval. He was here to prove that humanity had something valuable that they had never expected. The first few notes he played were shaky. The Xenotone was strange. Its vibrations were unlike anything he had ever felt before, its sound both haunting and sharp. He could see the aliens' amusement growing. One alien, with long, tentacle-like limbs, whispered something to the others, and they all snickered. "Pathetic," Lyrex muttered under his breath, but Michael heard it. His grip tightened on the instrument. But then something changed. The music began to flow more smoothly. Michael's fingers moved instinctively, his body finding a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was becoming something more than just random noise. The notes began to take shape, growing stronger and more powerful with each passing second. His heart began to race as he let the music carry him. This wasn't about impressing them anymore. This was about telling a story, his story and humanity's. As the sound grew richer, the aliens fell silent. The teasing had stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable tension. The air in the room seemed to thicken, and Michael felt their eyes on him. But this time, there was no mockery, just silence. The Xenotone hummed in harmony with Michael's growing confidence, and as the melody swirled around the room, Michael realized something. The aliens might have underestimated him, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. He wasn't just a human playing an alien instrument. He was telling them something they had never considered. The music he played wasn't meant to impress them, but to connect with them on a deeper level. His fingers danced across the Xenotone, playing a melody that told the story of survival and strength. something no alien species could ever truly understand, no matter how advanced they were. It was raw, it was real, and it was human. Still, the aliens remained quiet. But there was a shift now, a subtle change in their expressions. One alien's eyes narrowed, then widened in confusion. Another shifted uncomfortably in their seat. The laughter had died down, but there was still no applause, no praise. Lyrex's voice broke the silence again, but this time it wasn't mocking. "Enough," he said sharply, his voice now colder than before. Michael hesitated for a moment, but then stopped playing. The room was thick with unspoken words. He had done what he came to do. He had shown them that music, human music, was not something to be mocked. It had power. It had meaning. The aliens remained still, their expressions unreadable. Michael could feel the tension in the air. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he had made his mark. They hadn't laughed at him this time, and that was enough. The first note. The room was thick with expectation as Michael held the Xenotone in his hands. The alien spectators were silent now, their earlier mockery replaced with an almost palpable curiosity. The sleek, otherworldly design of the instrument hummed softly against his palms. It was unlike anything he had ever played before. Its surface seemed to ripple, almost alive, as though waiting for him to unlock its secrets. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him. The intense gazes of the aliens focused on him, waiting for him to fail, waiting for the spectacle to turn into a joke. They thought they knew everything. They believed that human music was primitive, unsophisticated. But Michael had something they didn't expect: the power of emotion. He had lived through hardship, pain, and triumph, experiences that no alien could truly understand. Now, it was his turn to show them that humanity had depth. Michael took a slow, steady breath. His fingers lightly brushed against the strings of the Xenotone. The sound it emitted was strange at first, sharp and unsettling, like a tone from another dimension. His fingers trembled just slightly as he adjusted to its alien feel, but he steadied himself. He had trained for moments like this, where his very soul would be laid bare for the world to see. He struck the first note. A soft, haunting sound echoed through the chamber, filling the silence with its vibrancy. It wasn't like any music the aliens had heard. The Xenotone responded to his touch with a unique resonance, the sound ethereal, almost otherworldly. It wasn't the controlled, mechanical hum the aliens had expected. It was raw, real, and it carried with it the echo of human experience. Michael's breath caught in his chest as he let the sound linger in the air, his fingers finding a rhythm that felt natural, almost instinctive. For a moment, the aliens were still. Their eyes widened slightly. Some exchanged curious glances, their expressionless faces giving nothing away. The first note had barely settled before Michael pressed on, his fingers moving with a new sense of purpose. He felt the rhythm shift as he transitioned into a deeper, more resonant chord. The Xenotone responded with a low hum, vibrating through his body in ways that felt almost intimate. But the room remained still. The aliens sat in silence, their faces unreadable, their alien minds processing the strange, unexpected quality of the humans' music. They had been expecting something awkward, something laughable maybe, but what they heard was stirring. Michael wasn't just playing notes, he was creating a connection. With every string he strummed, he wove a thread of humanity's heart into the air. There was a sense of loss in the way he played, but also a strength, a hope, a refusal to be silenced. Lyrex, the alien leader, folded his arms across his chest, his gaze sharp. He had always viewed humans as inferior, emotionally shallow, easily manipulated, and prone to making mistakes. Music was an art form that belonged to advanced civilizations, not a species like theirs. And yet, there was something unsettling about the human's melody. Carried weight, something Lyrex had not expected. Was it possible? Could a human evoke such depth? Michael's fingers moved with growing confidence, the music becoming more fluid as he let his emotions pour into the Xenotone. Each chord seemed to carry with it the weight of 1,000 stories. Memories of loss, of love, of struggle, emotions that no alien could ever experience in the same way. His music began to build slowly, gradually, layer by layer. The sound was evolving, becoming a song, not just a sequence of notes. It wasn't just a performance. It was a story. He paused for a brief moment, letting the final chord of his latest progression resonate in the air. The aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The energy in the room had changed. There was a subtle, unspoken shift, and Lyrex could feel it. He wasn't sure what it meant, but he was beginning to sense that something was happening. Something real. Michael took another breath and launched into a powerful, sweeping crescendo. The Xenotone seemed to react to his energy, the notes swelling, rising higher and higher with each stroke. The aliens shifted, the corners of their eyes narrowing in disbelief. They had expected to mock him, to watch him flounder and fail. Instead, they were being drawn into his music, whether they wanted to or not. The vibrations of the instrument seemed to permeate the very air, settling in the hearts of each alien present. The sound was not just something they heard, it was something they felt. A deep, resonant hum that coursed through their bodies, settling deep in their chests. It was as if Michael's music had become a bridge between two worlds. The alien onlookers, initially so confident in their superiority, were now uncertain, their emotions rising to the surface in spite of themselves. Lyrex, who had been leaning back in his chair with a smug grin just moments before, now found himself unable to move. The arrogance he had once carried was faltering, replaced with an emotion he didn't quite understand. The music had shattered his carefully constructed image of human weakness. The sound, so simple yet powerful, was making him question everything. Could this truly be the product of a primitive species? The others, too, were visibly affected. One alien, with translucent skin, looked as though they were fighting to hold back something. Perhaps tears, perhaps simply an overwhelming flood of emotions. The music was touching them, breaking through their defenses, and they couldn't stop it. Michael had managed to breach their cold, calculated exterior with nothing but the simple power of his heart, his humanity. As the final note approached, Michael's fingers hovered over the strings of the Xenotone. The music had become almost too much for him to control. The alien room was completely still now, every eye fixed on him. It was no longer about performance or showing off. It had become about connection. It was about proving that humanity had something these aliens could never take away. Michael's fingers struck the final chord, the sound filling the air, lingering like a breath held too long. The note resonated and hung in the room, vibrating in the silence that followed. The Xenotone slowly faded, and with it, the tension in the air. The human hero lowered the instrument, his heart still pounding, but his mind at ease. He had played, not for them but for humanity, and he had done it. A melody that speaks. The room was heavy with silence, thick with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Michael's fingers hovered above the strings of the Xenotone, still resonating with the echoes of the final chord. The sound of the instrument seemed to linger in the air, vibrating through the walls and into the very bones of the aliens seated before him. Each note he had played had been filled with raw emotion, a reflection of his life, of humanity's struggles, dreams, and deepest fears. It wasn't perfect, but it was human, and that was the point. Lyrex, who had been at the forefront of the mocking, was now sitting still, his sharp, glowing eyes wide, fixated on Michael. His tail, which had been twitching with impatience earlier, was now still. The smirk that had once spread across his face was gone, replaced with an expression of intense concentration. The other aliens around him were equally transfixed, their bodies rigid, their faces unreadable. The music had affected them more than they had ever anticipated. Michael looked around the room. The once dismissive aliens were no longer sneering or laughing. Some of them had their heads slightly tilted, as though trying to make sense of what they were hearing. One alien, with elongated arms and deep purple skin, appeared to be trying to suppress something, a flicker of emotion, or was it something deeper, within their alien gaze? The tension in the air was palpable, the uncertainty hanging between Michael and the alien audience. What was happening? Michael, still holding the Xenotone, took a steadying breath, his pulse racing. He hadn't expected them to be so moved. Yes, he had hoped to show them something, to make them realize that humanity was more than just a race of simple beings. But this was more than he had ever imagined. He cleared his throat and glanced at the alien leader, Lyrex, who was now staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. I didn't mean to cause offense, Michael said, his voice quiet, almost tentative. I just wanted to show you the depth of what we can create. Lyrex's voice, when it came, was low and strained, as though he were searching for the right words, but none seemed to be enough. You are different from what we thought. The alien leader's words sent a ripple through the room. Michael had expected to hear mockery, maybe laughter or indifference, but this was something entirely different. Lyrex's voice trembled ever so slightly. An alien leader, who had once looked down on humans as a primitive species, now seemed humbled, or at the very least, confused. Michael straightened slightly, unsure of how to respond. He was used to skepticism, used to being told that his music, his creativity was a waste of time, but this was new. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to feel victorious or worried. The aliens hadn't said a word yet, and the silence was more suffocating than before. One of the aliens, an older being with pale, transparent skin, leaned forward in their seat, their long, narrow fingers tapping gently on their chair. A faint ripple passed across their skin, indicating that they were processing the music, trying to understand it on a deeper level. Human. The alien spoke, their voice soft but clear. What is this music? Why does it stir something within us? Why does it feel so real? Michael's throat tightened. He hadn't expected to be asked such a question, certainly not by one of the aliens who had mocked him earlier. It's more than just sound, he said, his voice steadying as he spoke. It's emotion. It's a reflection of everything we've been through. Our pain, our joy, our longing, and our survival. Music is a way for us to express what words cannot. The aliens exchanged glances, some of them fidgeting, clearly uncomfortable with the raw emotion Michael had woven into the music. It was clear now that this wasn't just a performance. Michael hadn't simply played an alien instrument. He had conveyed something far more complex. It was a universal language, one that reached beyond the confines of physical form, beyond species and systems of knowledge. But the questions still lingered in the air. Why had it moved them? Why had they, the superior beings who had conquered so many worlds, been affected by this strange human music? As Michael stood there, waiting for an answer that didn't seem to come, he began to realize something. He had done more than play a piece of music. He had breached their understanding of humanity. He had shown them that beneath the surface, humans had a spirit that could not be ignored. Lyrex's voice broke through the silence again, deeper this time, filled with something more than curiosity. There was a sense of reverence, something Michael couldn't quite place. Your music, it tells a story. It speaks to us in a way we cannot explain. There is strength in it, a power we did not anticipate. Michael felt his heart race. Could it be? Could the aliens actually be feeling something that resembled respect? For the first time, Lyrex wasn't looking at him with disdain. The aliens had always seen themselves as superior, but here they were, listening to a human with newfound attention. They weren't laughing. They weren't mocking him. And as Michael stood there, hands still on the Xenotone, a strange sense of power surged through him. He wasn't just a human musician anymore. He was an ambassador, someone who had opened a door between two worlds. The aliens, once so sure of their dominance, were now grappling with something they could not explain. The silence stretched on, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. The music had done its work. It had softened the rigid walls the aliens had built around themselves. It had cracked their belief in their own superiority. In that one moment, Michael had proven the value of human emotion, and perhaps the most important thing of all, humanity was not to be underestimated. As Lyrex finally broke the silence, his voice was quieter, filled with a hint of something Michael hadn't heard before. Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps we have much more to learn from you than we thought. For the first time in this encounter, Michael allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He had done it. He had broken through their walls. The turning point. The silence in the room had taken on a strange weight, one that felt almost tangible. Michael stood with the Xenotone still cradled in his hands, his mind racing. He had played his heart out, pouring everything he had into each note, but the outcome was far beyond what he had imagined. The aliens, those who had mocked him, belittled humanity, were no longer laughing. Their faces were unreadable, their gazes intense. There was a deep, unspoken shift in the air, and Michael felt it in his bones. He had expected this moment to be fleeting. The aliens might have been moved for a brief moment, but he knew their superiority complex too well to believe that his music could permanently change their views. He had hoped for respect, but a part of him feared they would ultimately dismiss him as just another experiment, another curiosity to mock. Yet, he couldn't deny the stirring in his chest as the weight of their attention settled on him. Finally, Lyrex, the leader of the aliens, broke the silence. His voice was softer than before, less commanding and more reflective. "What you played." His words seemed to falter, as though the alien leader was struggling to comprehend the depth of what had just happened. "It spoke of something I do not understand." Michael held his breath, unsure whether to take offense or offer a response. He wasn't used to being treated with such uncertainty. For so long, humanity had been dismissed as weak and primitive in the eyes of more advanced species. Music, to the aliens, had been nothing more than a tool for control and ritual, not an emotional expression. But Michael had just shattered that view. He had shown them a human's heart, raw and unguarded. "What do you mean?" Michael asked carefully, trying to mask the uncertainty in his voice. Lyrex stepped forward, his usually proud posture now softened. "It is not just a song. It is a message. It speaks of something we have never considered." He paused, glancing at his crew, who were still sitting motionless. "Humans, you are capable of such depth. We have overlooked you." The weight of the words settled on Michael like a physical presence. He couldn't tell if it was an admission of respect or just a mere acknowledgement of a truth the aliens had avoided for so long. He tried to process the significance of Lyrex's words, but they hung in the air, too big, too complex to fully grasp at that moment. One of the aliens, a large, four-armed creature with shimmering blue skin, stood up slowly. Their voice, though deep and grating, was filled with something Michael hadn't expected: concern. "Lyrex is right," the alien said, addressing the leader. "This music, it calls to something deep inside us, something we have tried to suppress. Our species has long prided itself on our dominance. We never needed to understand the emotions of others. Now, we are forced to ask, what are we missing?" The room seemed to hold its breath as this alien spoke. The others exchanged glances and Michael could see it, the shift. The once mocking aliens were now uncertain. What had been a laughable dare had turned into something far more profound. Michael had shaken their worldview, cracked open the carefully constructed walls they had built around themselves. Michael took a step forward, his voice steady but filled with a quiet strength. "You mocked us because you didn't understand. But now, you've felt what it's like to be human, haven't you?" His words were almost a challenge, but they came from a place of deep sincerity. "Music, for us, isn't just something we play. It's how we survive. It's how we communicate with each other and with ourselves. We don't just create music to entertain or control. We do it because it's part of who we are." A murmur rippled through the alien crowd. The large, four-armed alien nodded slowly, as though digesting Michael's words. There was an awkward silence before another alien spoke. This one smaller, with iridescent skin that shifted in color as it moved. "You're saying your music tells a story?" the alien asked, its voice tremulous, as if it was finally beginning to understand. "You humans don't just play for entertainment? You express things through it." Michael nodded. "Yes, through music, we express the unspoken things. Our pain, our hopes, our joys. It's not just noise. It's our souls speaking." The room went quiet again, and for the first time since he had been brought before them, Michael felt a spark of hope flicker within him. The Xenotone had not only silenced their mocking, It had made them see something in him, and through him in humanity. He wasn't just a curious creature from a backwater planet anymore. He had shown them something they couldn't ignore. Lyrex's expression had softened even further, and his voice took on an almost reverent tone. Perhaps we were wrong about humans. Your song speaks to us in a way that logic never could. We have looked at you only as tools for our conquest, but now... He faltered for a moment before continuing. Now we see you as equals. The words were slow to register, but they hit Michael with the force of an unexpected storm. Equals. For so long, humans had been at the mercy of species far more advanced than they were. They had been overlooked, ignored, even exploited. But here, in this room, one alien leader, no, many of them, were admitting that humanity had something of value to offer. Michael could hardly believe it. The music he had played wasn't just something to entertain them. It was a revelation. His hands, still resting on the Xenotone, felt like they belonged to someone else. The instrument had become an extension of himself, a channel for his emotions. He hadn't just played for the aliens' approval. He had played for the chance to be seen, to be heard. The large blue-skinned alien was the next to speak, their voice quiet but firm. Your song has done more than show us your skill. It has shown us our own flaws. We have underestimated you, underestimated the depth of your race. And for that, we apologize. Michael swallowed hard, the weight of those words sinking deep into his chest. Apology accepted, he said softly, feeling his voice crack. But what did it mean? They had apologized, yes. But what came next? Was this the beginning of something greater? Could humans, who had been the underdogs for so long, finally be seen as equals? Lyrex stepped forward once more, his gaze unwavering. You have earned our respect, human, and you have opened our eyes to the value of your species. What you have done today will change the way we view all of humanity. Michael looked around the room, his heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't expected to feel. Pride. His music had broken the walls of prejudice and superiority. He had shown the aliens that humanity was not a joke, not something to be mocked or underestimated. And as he stood there, feeling the weight of their respect, he knew this was only the beginning. The aliens are moved. The room was heavy with silence, a silence that no longer felt uncomfortable but profound. The once mocking aliens were now deep in thought, their eyes fixed on Michael, who still stood in front of them, his hands resting on the Xenotone. It was as if the music had bridged a gap between them, a gap that had existed not just between humans and aliens, but between all species who believed they were more advanced, more powerful, or more deserving. Michael had done something no one thought possible. He hadn't just impressed the aliens with his skill. No, he had touched them in a way that even their superior intellect couldn't explain. Their stoic expressions had started to crack, their previous arrogance fading in the face of an emotion they had long since dismissed as primitive. This, however, was not a fleeting moment of recognition. Michael's song had ignited a deeper, more powerful shift within them. It was as if his music had found the cracks in their armor and forced the light in. Now they were questioning everything. Lyrex, who had once been the first to mock Michael, was now the first to speak. But his words came slowly, as though even he struggled to comprehend the change happening within him. This music, this sound, it is not just something that comes from a species of lowly beings. It is more than that. What we have heard is not mere entertainment. It is the embodiment of something greater, something we failed to see. The room shifted in energy again. Lyrex's voice had softened. Gone was the command and the disdain. Now there was something akin to respect. A few of the other aliens exchanged glances, and Michael could almost see the change sweeping through them. It was like watching a dam break, the slow but inevitable collapse of centuries of arrogance. The alien with translucent skin, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward, their eyes still shimmering with emotion, though they struggled to hide it. "It is beautiful," the alien said, their voice barely more than a whisper. "It moves us in ways we cannot describe. Our thoughts, our minds, everything we thought we knew is no longer enough. How can something so raw, stir so deeply?" Another alien, one whose 4 arms had once been crossed in mockery, now placed them carefully on the table in front of them. Their face, though still masked by alien physiology, reflected something Michael hadn't seen before: genuine awe. "You say humans are primitive," the alien said, their voice rough, their gaze unwavering. "But what you have shown us today is far from primitive. It is complex. It speaks to a part of us we didn't know existed." Michael, who had thought he might break down under the weight of the moment, stood a little straighter. For the first time since entering the room, he wasn't just playing to prove himself. He wasn't just playing to survive. He was playing to connect with them. And now, as he stood there, watching them wrestle with their own emotions, he realized that his music had done just that. It had connected them not just to him but to each other and, in a strange way, to humanity itself. Lyrex cleared his throat and stood taller, his voice no longer laced with mockery, but with what Michael could only describe as a new, solemn respect. "We came here expecting to find something weak, something we could easily dismiss. We assumed that you would play us something laughable, something we could ridicule. But now—" He paused, his eyes meeting Michael's, a subtle shift in his demeanor. "Now I understand. You are not what we thought. We were wrong about you." The words hung in the air. The air, once thick with disdain, now carried a sense of quiet reflection. Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. After all the years of being dismissed, belittled, and looked down upon, he had finally done it. He had shown them that humanity had something deeper, something that couldn't be measured by technology or intellect. It was something that came from the soul. The alien who had asked the question about the music earlier stood now, their skin changing colors in a subtle display of emotion. "I must admit," the alien said, their voice filled with a strange vulnerability, "I did not understand humans. I thought you were beneath us. But now, having heard you, I see that we have failed to recognize the true strength of your species." Michael wasn't sure how to respond. He had been prepared for ridicule, for rejection, but not for this. The silence in the room was different now. It was heavier, but it was a respectful kind of silence. The aliens weren't looking at him as a specimen to study or a source of entertainment. They were looking at him as an equal. The large blue-skinned alien spoke next, their voice deep and resonant. "What you have shown us is beyond music. It is the essence of your being, a depth we could never have imagined. And for that, you have our respect." For a moment, Michael just stood there, the weight of their words settling in. He had come here to play for them, to show them what humanity was capable of. But in doing so, he had shown them something even more profound: the power of vulnerability, of opening oneself up through art. He had opened a door, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. Lyrex's next words broke the stillness again, but they were different now. There was no mockery, no superiority. "You were right, human. Music is not just for entertainment. It is an expression of the soul. And you have shown us that we, too, have souls. That we, too, can feel beyond our intellect, beyond our power." For the first time since Michael had walked into the room, he saw a smile. It wasn't much, just the smallest twitch of the alien leader's mouth. But it was there, a sign that the walls had begun to crumble. "What will you do now?" Lyrex asked, his voice more somber, yet filled with genuine curiosity. Michael, still processing the weight of their words, finally spoke, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions running through him. Now we learn from each other." And with that, he placed the Xenotone down gently, a symbol of the music that had changed everything, and the conversation that would change the course of their history. The revelation. The room, once filled with the tension of mockery and superiority, was now heavy with reflection. The music Michael had played still seemed to resonate in the air, the final chord lingering like a memory that couldn't be shaken off. Michael's hands were still resting on the Xenotone, but the instrument now felt like a tool of revelation rather than just a musical device. He had done it. He had crossed a threshold, and now the aliens in the room were no longer looking at him with disdain or confusion. They were looking at him as something else, an equal, a peer, a bridge between two worlds. Lyrex, who had once been the most vocal in his mockery of humanity, was now standing at the front of the group, his posture relaxed yet thoughtful. There was no trace of the arrogance that had once defined him. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and measured, yet there was an undercurrent of awe that couldn't be hidden. "We, who have seen and conquered so much," Lyrex began, his eyes scanning the room, "have lived with a belief that we are the pinnacle of existence, that our intellect, our technology, our power made us superior to every species we encountered. And yet," he paused, as if choosing his next words carefully, "yet, here we are, standing before you, a human who has done more in a few moments than we have in centuries. You have shown us something we didn't think possible, something we never thought to consider, the power of the heart." There was a brief silence, and the other aliens stood still, processing his words. Michael could feel his heart racing as he tried to digest what was happening. He hadn't come here to change their beliefs. He hadn't expected to show them the depth of humanity's heart. But now, the air was thick with realization. Humans weren't the weak, primitive species the aliens had once thought. They were something far more complex, far more powerful. Another alien, a sleek, silver-skinned creature with 6 eyes, stepped forward. Their voice was calm but laced with wonder. "We have witnessed countless civilizations, studied countless species. We've seen power, intelligence, and adaptability. But we've never seen this. This music, it isn't just a sound. It isn't just a method of communication. It is a reflection of your very being. It is an expression of something deeper, something we have never fully understood." Michael felt a lump form in his throat as the weight of their words settled in. These weren't just compliments. They were admissions that humanity had something to offer, something to teach. He wasn't just a representative of his species now. He was a messenger, carrying the essence of humanity's true strength into an alien world that had long believed it was superior. The silver-skinned alien continued. "We thought we understood everything there was to know. We believed we were the most advanced, the most evolved. But you," the alien's voice faltered for a second, "you have shattered that illusion. We have underestimated you. And for that, we apologize." The room was still, but the apology was profound, not just in the words spoken but in the weight of their meaning. Michael didn't expect them to apologize, not in the way they had. But hearing it, hearing the genuine sincerity in their voices, made him realize something. This wasn't just about music anymore. This was about a new understanding, a new beginning. Lyrex, still standing at the front, took a step closer. His usual poise was replaced with something else, something Michael had never expected to see. Vulnerability. "What you have shown us is not just art or emotion. It is a truth we have been blind to for too long. We thought that only through power and intellect could a species rise above the rest. But now we see that there is more to existence than knowledge or strength. There is the heart, the ability to feel, to connect, to understand. And that is something we have never truly valued." Michael's mind was spinning. He had come here expecting to be ridiculed. He had expected to prove that humans had something worth acknowledging, but he never imagined it would turn into this. He had never thought that his music, his humanity, would challenge an entire species' worldview, but it had. And not just for a moment, it had left a lasting mark. The aliens continued to speak among themselves, their voices filled with the sense of profound realization. One by one, they began to express their thoughts, their amazement at the depth of what Michael had done. The alien with the 4 arms, who had been the first to openly mock him, now stood in quiet contemplation. The shifting of their translucent skin revealed the subtle emotion that Michael had never expected to see from such a stoic race. "We underestimated you," the alien with 4 arms said, their voice steady. "And I have spent my entire life believing that our race was the only one capable of greatness. But your music has proven otherwise. It has opened my eyes to something much larger than myself, something that no amount of technology or power could ever touch." Michael swallowed, feeling the full weight of their words. He had done it. He had changed them. He had changed their understanding of humanity, of what it meant to be alive, to be more than just the sum of one's intelligence or power. Lyrex spoke again, his voice more serious now, as though making a promise. We will learn from you. We will open our minds to the possibilities you have shown us. Humanity is not what we thought. You have more to offer than we could ever have imagined. And we will listen. The finality in his words, the shift in his tone was undeniable. It was done. The transformation had occurred. Michael, the human musician, had not just survived the aliens' mockery. He had won their respect. But more than that, he had begun the process of forging a bond between two vastly different species, one that would change the course of history. Michael didn't know what came next, but for the first time since he had arrived on this strange, intimidating ship, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The aliens were no longer the invincible, untouchable species they had once seemed. They were now his equals, open to learning, to understanding, and, most importantly, to the idea that humanity, against all odds, had something incredible to offer.